Hey, Holy Girl. Welcome back to Holy Girl Talk. I am so glad you're here today. Before we dive in, I want you to take a moment and just breathe. Relax your shoulders, unclench your jaw, let your stomach soften, let your chest loosen, let the weight of today slide off you for a second. Because this episode, this one is tender, it's layered, it's deeply human, and honestly, it's for every woman who has ever felt judged, misunderstood, mislabeled, or reduced to a version of herself that wasn't even accurate. And if this is your first time tuning in, hey, love, welcome. Truly. I don't know how you found this podcast or who sent it to you, but I'm glad you're here. You're stepping into a space where we don't pretend everything is perfect, where we don't sugarcoat reality, and where we don't judge the version of you that's still growing. This is a space for honesty, for softness, for spiritual clarity, and for the kind of girl talk that actually heals you instead of draining you. So, if life has been loud, if people have been projecting their assumptions onto you, or if you've been carrying a heavy story alone, let this episode feel like a reset, a reminder that God sees beyond all the noise and speaks to the real you beneath it. Mary Magdalene is one of the most misrepresented women in the entire Bible. For centuries, people have talked about her like she was a problem, a scandal, a cautionary tale. But when you actually read scripture, you realize none of those labels were true. She wasn't who people said she was. She wasn't who rumors made her out to be. She wasn't defined by the stories others projected onto her. She was a woman Jesus restored, a woman Jesus trusted, and a woman Jesus elevated at one of the most important moments in history. And holy girl, that alone should make your spirit sit up a little straighter. Because how many times have you been misunderstood? How many times have people decided who you were without ever knowing your heart? How many times have you been judged by your past, your mistakes, your reputation, or somebody else's version of your story? How many times has the world tried to shrink you down to something small when God was calling you into something sacred? This episode is for the women who have been misjudged but are still chosen. The women who have been talked about but not truly known. The women who have been underestimated, mischaracterized, or overshadowed by narratives that were never theirs to begin with. If you've ever felt like you're fighting your way out of a box someone else built around you, Mary Magdalene's story is going to hit you right in the heart. And if this is your first time tuning in, hey love, welcome to the family. Truly, you're safe here. We talk deep, we get real, we talk about God and purpose and healing in a way that feels honest and modern and actually relatable. This podcast is your place to exhale, to be yourself, to grow without judgment, and to remember who God says you are, not who people decided you were. All right, holy girl, let's get into it. Mary Magdalene, the woman misjudged by the world, but handpicked by heaven. Before we even talk about who Mary Magdalene really was, we have to talk about who people said she was. Because for centuries, her name has been dragged through assumptions, gossip, and completely inaccurate narratives. And honestly, that alone makes her story feel painfully modern. Mary Magdalene has been called everything from a scandalous woman to someone with a dark reputation, even though scripture never once describes her that way. The world projected an identity onto her that didn't belong to her, and that mislabeling followed her for generations. And tell me that doesn't sound familiar. Tell me you've never had people decide who you were based on rumor, jealousy, fragments of a story, or a version of you from a chapter you already healed from. Mary's story starts with being misunderstood. People looked at her and saw what they wanted to see. They made assumptions. They crafted narratives. They stitched together pieces that didn't belong to her and turned it into a reputation she never asked for. And for so many women listening, this hits deep because sometimes the loudest story about you is the one that isn't even true. Sometimes people are more committed to their idea of you than they are to the truth of you. Sometimes you outgrow who you used to be, but the world keeps trying to drag you back into it. And sometimes you're walking in healing, but people still try to attach you to brokenness that no longer fits. Mary Magdalene reminds us that God is not intimidated by the labels people place on you. He's not confused by your past, your struggles, your humanity, or the stories people tell about you. God doesn't look at you and see a reputation. He looks at you and sees restoration. He looks at you and sees purpose. He looks at you and sees someone worth choosing. And that is exactly where Mary's story begins. Not with scandal, but with healing. Not with shame, but with deliverance. Not with who people assumed she was, but with who Jesus knew she was becoming. What I love most is this: the very areas of Mary's life that people judged became the areas where God revealed his power. The places where others saw shame, God saw opportunity. The places where others whispered, God spoke identity. It's a reminder that people can mislabel you, but they cannot cancel what God has anointed. They can misunderstand you, but they cannot override God's understanding of you. People can gossip about you, but they cannot rewrite the purpose written over your life. Mary Magdalene stands as proof that being misjudged does not disqualify you. If anything, it positions you for God to show exactly who he is through you. Now let's talk about the moment everything shifted. Mary Magdalene's encounter with Jesus. Because, holy girl, this is where the entire narrative changes. Scripture says in Luke 8:2 that Jesus healed her, delivered her, and set her free. And I want you to really imagine this. Before her purpose, before her loyalty, before her calling, there was a moment where Jesus looked at her not as a label, not as a rumor, not as a reputation, but as a daughter, a woman, a soul worth restoring. This wasn't a polite surface level interaction. This was deep healing. This was identity level transformation. This was God stepping into the parts of her life she kept hidden and saying, I'm not leaving you here. And we don't know what Mary was carrying before this moment. The Bible doesn't give us a detailed emotional backstory, but we do know this. She was suffering. She was battling something she couldn't fix alone. She was tied to a past that was trying to swallow her. She was living under weight that wasn't meant to be hers. And Jesus didn't just touch her symptoms, he healed the source. And isn't that exactly how God works with us? We bring him our chaos, our wounds, our trauma responses, our insecurities, our self-protection, our fear, and he meets us with compassion instead of judgment. He doesn't say, fix yourself before you come to me. He says, come to me and let me heal what broke you. Mary's encounter with Jesus is the perfect picture of this. He didn't shame her. He didn't ask her to justify her past. He didn't interrogate her about what she had been through. He simply restored her fully, intentionally, and completely. In the moment Mary experienced freedom, she did something that still inspires me. She followed him, not out of obligation, not out of fear, but out of gratitude and devotion. She didn't cling to her old identity or return to the environments that drained her. She didn't try to negotiate between her past and her healing. She stepped into a new life with boldness, with clarity, with a heart fully surrendered to God's direction. This is important for modern women to hear. Healing is not just about being freed from something. It's about being freed into something, into purpose, into clarity, into wholeness, into identity, into calling. Mary Magdalene didn't just walk away from bondage. She walked toward destiny. She let God rewrite her narrative. She let restoration become her new reputation. And girl, some of you listening are in that same place. You've been carrying weight that was never meant to be yours. You've been living in stories you've outgrown. You've been trying to function through pain you've normalized. And God is saying, let me restore you. Let me free you. Let me redefine you. Mary's encounter is your reminder that one moment with God can shift the entire direction of your life, your identity, your confidence, your future, and your purpose. Mary's healing wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning. Once Mary experienced healing, freedom, and restoration, something beautiful happened. She didn't just go back to a regular life. She didn't slip quietly into the background. She didn't treat her encounter with Jesus like a one-time emotional moment. Mary responded with her whole life, and holy girl, this is what spiritual maturity looks like. When God heals you, you don't stay where you were, you move, you shift, you follow. Scripture tells us that Mary Magdalene became one of Jesus' most devoted followers. She supported his ministry, traveled with him, learned from him, and stayed close even when the path got confusing, dangerous, or inconvenient. She wasn't the loudest disciple. She didn't try to compete for attention. She didn't build her identity around proximity or position. Her devotion wasn't performative, it was genuine, quiet, steady, deep. She stayed because she loved him, because she trusted him, and because she remembered who she was before he restored her. And here's the thing, loyalty means more when everything around you is unpredictable. Mary didn't follow Jesus because it made her popular. She didn't follow him because it was socially acceptable. She didn't follow him because it was safe. In fact, being connected to Jesus put her at risk socially, culturally, and politically. But loyalty rooted in gratitude is powerful. Once Jesus healed her, she decided, I'm not going back to the life that broke me. I'm walking with the one who restored me. Mary Magdalene is the blueprint for what it looks like to have a steady relationship with God, not emotional highs and burnout lows. Not a spiritual routine that falls apart the second life gets hard, but a devotion that stays consistent. A devotion that is built on the quiet moments, the intimate ones, the ones where no one is watching but heaven. And what I love most? Mary didn't follow Jesus because she wanted something from him. She followed because of what he had already done. She wasn't pushing for more miracles. She wasn't showing up for a blessing. She wasn't trying to secure a title. Her devotion was simply gratitude in motion, a healed woman choosing to walk with the one who healed her. For modern women, this hits differently because so many of us love God, but we struggle with consistency. We drift when life gets busy. We disconnect when we're overwhelmed. We doubt when things feel uncertain. But Mary reminds us that devotion isn't about perfection, it's about presence, staying, returning, choosing God again and again, not because everything is easy, but because he has already proven himself faithful. Mary Magdalene teaches us how to walk with God with a steady heart, how to be loyal without needing applause, how to be faithful without needing validation, how to show up day after day simply because we love him. And that devotion, it sets the stage for the moments that come next, the painful moments, the heartbreaking moments, and the moments where her loyalty becomes one of the most powerful testimonies in Scripture. When we talk about loyalty, we often imagine peaceful seasons, the moments where staying is easy, where faith feels natural, where everything around us makes sense. But Mary Magdalene's devotion is tested in a place most of us never want to go, the moment life falls apart. When Jesus is arrested, beaten, and sentenced to crucifixion, almost everyone disappears. The disciples scatter, the crowds vanish, fear takes over. But Mary, she stayed. Just pause and feel that for a second. She stayed. She stood at the foot of the cross while the one who healed her, restored her, and gave her a new life was hanging in agony. She stayed when her heart was breaking. She stayed when the future made no sense. She stayed when everything she believed seemed to be collapsing right in front of her. This wasn't the devotion of a fan. This was the devotion of someone whose life had been changed at the deepest level. Someone who loved Jesus, not for what he could give her, but for who he was to her. And holy girl, this is where her story starts to feel painfully relatable. Because some of you know what it feels like to stand in front of something you love falling apart. A relationship, a dream, a season, a sense of identity. A version of your life you thought would last forever. You know what it feels like to stay present in the middle of heartbreak, holding on to faith through tears, confusion, or devastation. You know what it feels like to be the last one standing in a situation everyone else ran away from. Mary Magdalene didn't just stand near the cross physically, she stayed emotionally, spiritually. She didn't shut down. She didn't numb herself. She didn't pretend everything was fine. She felt the weight of that moment, and instead of fleeing, she allowed her love for Jesus to anchor her. That kind of courage doesn't come from personality, it comes from transformation. And here's something most people forget. Staying wasn't safe. Being associated with Jesus in that moment was dangerous. Roman soldiers were watching, leaders were mocking. The crowd had already turned hostile, yet Mary stayed rooted, unashamed, unhidden. Her presence at the cross is one of the most powerful declarations of love in the entire Bible. It also reveals something that is so important for modern women to hear. Faithfulness isn't proven by how loudly you worship in the good times, it's proven by how deeply you stay when everything hurts. Mary shows us that real faith is not fragile. It doesn't run at the first sign of discomfort. It doesn't collapse when life shifts. It doesn't disappear when God feels silent. Real faith holds on even when the story doesn't make sense. Mary Magdalene's presence at the cross is a reminder that devotion is strongest in the places we're most afraid to stand. When everything around us looks lost, love becomes its bravest. And Mary, she became one of the bravest women in Scripture simply by refusing to walk away. Now, holy girl, this is the part of Mary Magdalene's story that still gives me chills. After the trauma of the crucifixion, after the grief, the silence, the uncertainty, the heartbreak, Scripture tells us something remarkable. Mary Magdalene is the first person to see the resurrected Jesus. Not Peter, not John, not the religious leaders, not the men who had walked with him for years. A woman, a previously misjudged woman, a woman society tried to label, a woman people underestimated, a woman whose past was constantly whispered about, a woman whose devotion never wavered. God chooses her. And I need you to really sit with that because God could have written that moment however he wanted. He could have chosen a well respected religious figure. He could have chosen a man to make it socially acceptable. He could have chosen a leader or someone with status. But instead, Jesus reveals himself first to a woman who had once been dismissed, misunderstood, and mislabeled. Why? Because God makes statements through his choices, and his choice of Mary Magdalene says this: I don't care what people called you, I know who you are. Your past does not disqualify your purpose. I choose the overlooked on purpose. I reveal myself to the faithful, not the famous. Your devotion matters more than your reputation. When Mary arrives at the tomb early that morning, heartbroken, grieving, doing what love does when it refuses to abandon, she becomes the first human being to witness resurrection. She is literally the first person to see hope alive again. She sees the empty tomb. She meets Jesus. She hears him call her by name, Mary, and that detail matters so much because he doesn't call her woman. He doesn't call her by a label or title. He calls her by her actual name. The name he always knew, the name unpolluted by opinion, the name untouched by rumor. That moment wasn't just a greeting, it was identity being spoken back into existence. And then Jesus entrusts her with the message. He tells her to go tell the disciples that he is alive, meaning Mary Magdalene becomes the first preacher of the resurrection, the first messenger of the gospel, the first voice carrying the greatest news the world has ever heard. Tell me again that God doesn't elevate the misjudged girl. Tell me again that your past disqualifies you. Tell me again that being misunderstood by people means being dismissed by heaven. Tell me again that God only uses the polished, the perfect, the publicly approved, because Mary Magdalene's story shuts all of that down. Mary wasn't chosen despite her past. She was chosen because her heart was aligned, devoted, faithful, and ready. God saw her loyalty at the cross. He saw her courage. He saw her love. And he said, I can entrust this moment to you. Holy girl, some of you listening need this reminder. People don't get to decide who God uses. They don't get to define your worth, limit your purpose, or label your calling. God sees you. God knows you. God calls you. And sometimes the very thing others misunderstood about you becomes the very place God shows off his glory. Mary's elevation wasn't an accident, it was intentional. It was prophetic, it was revolutionary. She was misjudged, but chosen. After Jesus reveals himself to Mary, he does something that still shakes the foundation of religious history. He commissions her, he gives her an assignment. He entrusts her with the message that will change the entire world. And holy girl, this part right here, this is where we see the gap between how society sees a woman and how God sees her. Jesus tells Mary, go and tell my brothers. Not wait for the man. Not stay quiet. Not you're too emotional to lead. Not your past disqualifies you. Not you're a woman. Step aside. He sends her. He puts the weight of the resurrection announcement on her voice. He puts divine truth in her mouth. He trusts her to carry the message that life has defeated death. And it's wild because at this point in history, women's voices weren't even considered legally reliable. In court, a woman's testimony didn't hold weight. Society said her voice doesn't count. But God said, watch me rewrite the rules. This is why Mary's story matters so much for modern women. Because some of you have been told your voice is too much, too emotional, too loud, too opinionated, too spiritual, too strong, too soft, or not enough. Some of you have been made to believe that leadership is for other people, that purpose is for more polished people, that influence is for more perfect people. And yet, look at Jesus. He purposely puts history's most important announcement into the hands of the woman everyone else dismissed. He didn't ask for permission from culture. He didn't wait for society to catch up. He didn't choose the person with the biggest platform. He chose the one with the purest devotion. God is not intimidated by your story. He's not confused by your past. He's not second guessing your calling. When He chooses you, it's intentional. When He sends you, it's purposeful. When He gives you a message to carry, it's because He knows your heart can hold it. Mary Magdalene ran with the message. She didn't shrink. She didn't apologize. She didn't second guess whether she was qualified. She didn't let the opinions of others silence her. She moved with urgency, clarity, and authority because the one who healed her also commissioned her. And holy girl, that's you. Some of you have been given visions, ideas, assignments, and dreams that feel too big. But Mary's moment reminds us, if God placed it in your hands, He already decided you could carry it. Mary didn't preach because she was perfect. She preached because she was chosen. She didn't speak because she was confident. She spoke because Jesus told her to go. She didn't lead because culture approved her. She led because heaven assigned her. There's a calling on your life that will not make sense to everyone, and that's fine. It doesn't have to. God is not waiting for your resume. He's responding to your willingness. And when He says, go tell them, your job isn't to question it, it's to move. Mary Magdalene became the messenger not because she was flawless, but because she was faithful. So let's bring this all the way home into your life, your heart, your healing, your identity. Because Mary Magdalene's story isn't just a beautiful redemption arc from the New Testament. It's a mirror, it's a map, it's a reminder for every woman listening who's been carrying narratives that never belonged to her in the first place. Mary shows us that you can be misjudged and still be chosen. You can have a past and still have a purpose. You can be talked about and still be trusted by God. You can be underestimated by people and still be elevated by heaven. And honestly, some of you are living under labels that God never wrote. Labels that came from trauma, from family, from friendships that broke you, from relationships that mishandled you, from mistakes you made when you were surviving, not thriving, from versions of yourself you've already outgrown. Mary Magdalene reminds us that you are allowed to rewrite the story. You are allowed to heal. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to outgrow the identity people assigned you. God didn't call Mary by her reputation. He called her by her name. And holy girl, He's doing the same for you. He's calling you by your identity, not your insecurity, by your purpose, not your past, by your spirit, not your shame. And here's something we don't talk enough about. Healing isn't just about letting go of pain, it's about letting go of old definitions, old versions of you, old narratives, old assumptions, old limitations, old roles you were never meant to play. Mary didn't cling to the story others gave her. She stepped into the one Jesus spoke over her. She didn't tether herself to who she used to be. She tethered herself to who He said she was becoming. And that's your invitation too. Some of you are in a season of shedding, releasing old expectations, old friendships, old mindsets, old coping mechanisms. Some of you are stepping into new callings, but still fighting the voice that says, who do you think you are? Some of you are terrified because God is elevating you in rooms that trigger your insecurities. And some of you are quietly rebuilding your life after being misunderstood or misrepresented. Mary Magdalene teaches us that your story is not over just because someone mishandled your beginning. God can still shift your narrative. He can still open doors. He can still speak your name with purpose. He can still place calling in your hands, even if your hands once held chaos. And the most beautiful part, Mary's transformation wasn't quick. It was committed. She didn't heal overnight. She didn't become confident overnight. She grew, she walked, she followed, she stayed present. She kept showing up. She let Jesus guide her evolution. Holy girl, your healing is not behind schedule. Your identity is not lost. Your purpose is not fragile. You are not defined by what people think they know about you. God is rewriting the parts of your story you thought were ruined. He is restoring what you thought you lost. He is calling you higher, not because you are perfect, but because you are willing. Mary Magdalene's life is your reminder that redemption is real, identity is fluid in God's hands, and your calling cannot be canceled by human opinion. All right, holy girl, take one more breath with me, in and out, let your shoulders soften, let your spirit settle. Because Mary Magdalene's story is one of those stories that sneaks up on you and gently rewrites something inside of you. And if today's episode stirred something, if it made you feel seen, if it made you feel known, if it reminded you that your past does not get the final say, let that sit with you a little longer. Let it heal you in places you thought were already closed. Mary Magdalene was misjudged, misunderstood, mislabeled, and underestimated. But God still chose her. God still called her. God still trusted her with the biggest moment in human history. And if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about how heaven sees you, I don't know what will. You are not the worst thing you've done. You are not the story someone else told about you. You are not the version of yourself you had to be in survival mode. You are chosen. You are loved. You are seen. And your story is still unfolding in ways you cannot even imagine yet. So, whatever label you've been carrying, whatever narrative you felt trapped under, whatever shame or insecurity has been whispering in the background, release it. God is calling you by your real name again. He's restoring you. He's rewriting your story. And there is purpose on your life that no amount of misunderstanding can erase. If this episode touched you, if it spoke life back into places you thought were dead, if it made your heart breathe a little easier, share it with another woman who might need the same reminder. Send it to a friend who feels judged, a sister who feels misunderstood, a woman who's rebuilding her identity one day at a time. You never know whose healing might begin because you shared a moment of truth. And make sure you're following the podcast so you never miss an episode. We're building something real here, a space for women who want God, but also want honesty, depth, clarity, and conversations that feel like a hug. Holy Girl Talk is your safe place, and I'm so grateful you're here. If you ever want to send a prayer request, a testimony, or an episode idea, you can always reach me at holygirltalkpodcast@gmail.com. I read your messages, I pray over them, and I hold space for every story you trust me with. All right, love, walk in your restored identity this week. Walk in confidence, walk in truth, walk like a woman who knows she is chosen. I love you, and I'll see you in the next episode.